In this presentation of access control trends in network security, we will cover the different types of access controls. Access control in network security determines who can access company resources. And it's not a blanket approach, it's who can access what company resources. For example, you could have an administrator who can access all, or an accounting team who can access just the accounting information, even if it is all stored on the same network. Access control either accepts or denies admittance into an area inside the network. Often, these controls have separate permissions for allowing access depending on who is requesting access. The availability to fulfill needs in access control, it's easily available, but it requires the right person with the correct know-how to put best practices in place. It's very easy to have the resources available to create access control policies, but you need to have a bird's eye view to understand what role or what person needs what information, and even at what designated time or place. In other words, there's many different parts of an access control policy that needs to be determined. Access control is available for all parts of a network, like switches, routers, firewall appliances, local machines, wireless networks, and more. The cost of implementation for access control can easily reach $100,000 or more each year. The major reason for this is because of the hardware required to implement and the expertise needed to implement for a network database and access controls. So it's important to note, though, most companies are adopting a cloud service provider in order to have access control to their company resources or their customers' data. Now, there are implementation issues within access control, such as the process being rushed and done incorrectly. Then mistakes you'd have to move back in order to cover your steps and take more time to correct them. In the upcoming slides, we will discuss the options for access controls, such as role-based access control, discretionary access control, mandatory access control, and others. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, recommends mandatory access control, but the decision is ultimately up to the organization and what works best for them. Remember, security is not just about protecting, but it's also about being available. So a balance must be struck, and this balance can be determined by the network administrator when creating an access control policy. Access control overall benefit to the end user. So what is the overall benefit of access control to the end user? The overall benefit for the end user is the ability to access only those resources they need to complete their work. If additional resources are needed, the communication between the end user, the network administrator, and policies created because of access control implementation will continue to protect company resources while equipping the worker with necessary permissions. So the four options: discretionary, mandatory, role-based, and attribute-based. Discretionary is who owns the information. Whoever owns the information is 100% responsible for sharing the information to whom they would like. But when they do share the information, then the person they shared it with now has the ability to share it with someone else. This puts a lot of weight and responsibility in trusting the user. Mandatory access control. This type is a central authority that grants access rights based on regulations created across the information system. This is usually the best way and the most thoughtful approach. Role-based. If you are scaling, or if you have turnover in a company, a role-based access control may be the right option for you, because it does not depend on the person's identity, such as Jack or Jill, but rather the role, accounting head or bookkeeper. They would have the same permissions, no matter who the individual person is. Attribute-based access control. Attribute-based access control is the least used but the most dynamic out of the other options, because you use a variety of information, such as the schedule the user works, what time of day, the location they are in, and who can access what when. Although this is the least used, it does give you the most dynamic approach for access control policies. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation.